"Don't come to the gala," my brother-in-law Julian posted in the family group chat. 11 relatives agreed I'd embarrass him in front of his CEO. I forwarded the screenshot to my venue manager. Julian received an automatic cancellation reply. "Your December 19th reservation at the Pinnacle has been canceled. Owner Mr. Matthew does not permit his property for events excluding him. Thank you for being here. Grab a warm glass of water. Sit down and listen to me tell the whole story." The notification came through at exactly 7:43 on a standard Tuesday morning. I was standing at the kitchen counter, still in my sweatpants, both hands wrapped around a thick ceramic mug of black coffee. The house was quiet. My wife, Emma, was upstairs getting ready for work. I was just staring out the window, watching the morning frost melt off the driveway. My phone buzzed once against the granite countertop. I glanced down out of pure, mindless habit. It was a booking confirmation from the automated system of the Pinnacle, the luxury event venue I quietly owned a massive stake in. The email subject line read, "New reservation, full venue hire, December 19th. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the heat travel down my chest, and tapped the screen to see the details. I set my mug down instantly. The name on the primary billing account was Julian, my brother-in-law. I stood there for a long moment, reading the letters of his name twice. It is a strange feeling when your brain perfectly comprehends the words on a screen, but your reality needs an extra 10 seconds to catch up and accept it. Julian, the vice president of corporate communications at his massive tech firm, had just booked my property for his company's elite end-of-year gala. Deposit paid, contract signed, and then my phone buzzed again. This time it was the family group chat. A massive digital room with 37 members of my wife's extended family. I had been avoiding that chat for 3 days. 3 days ago, Julian had dropped a message in there that felt like a physical punch to the gut. I opened the app and scrolled up to the exact message. Julian had typed, "Hey everyone, just a heads up about the corporate gala on the 19th. Matthew, I think it's probably best if you sit this one out. It's a very high-level professional crowd. You'd find it incredibly dull anyway, I'm sure." 15 minutes after that initial message, he had added the real dagger. "No offense meant, man. It's just really not your scene. I can't afford any slip-ups in front of my CEO." I stared at the screen, my jaw clenching so tight my teeth ached. What made my blood boil wasn't just Julian's unbelievable arrogance. It was the absolute silence from the rest of the family regarding his disrespect, followed by the casual agreement. 11 different relatives had chimed in over the next few hours. Not a single one of them pushed back. Not a single one of them defended me. They just kept the conversation moving. "Sounds like an amazing night, Julian. Can't wait to see the photos. We will definitely dress to impress." They agreed with him. They agreed that the guy who grew up in a trailer park, the guy who wore work boots instead of Italian loafers, would somehow tarnish their golden child's perfect evening. I looked back at the venue booking confirmation on my computer screen. The Pinnacle, the absolute crown jewel of the city's event spaces. Crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, a waiting list 6 months long. Julian was trying to impress his boss by securing the most exclusive spot in town. He wanted to show off. He wanted to prove he belonged in the upper echelon. He just had absolutely no idea who actually held the keys to that castle. I took a deep, slow breath, feeling the anger solidify into something cold, hard, and entirely focused. I took a screenshot of his text message in the family chat. I attached it to an email and forwarded it straight to Samuel, my venue manager. I didn't write a long, emotional essay. I just typed one single sentence. We were going to let him build his perfect little house of cards, right up until the wind blew. To truly understand the weight of that Tuesday morning, you have to understand the 5 years of history that led up to it. You have to understand the massive, uncrossable canyon between where I started and where my wife's family lived. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. Hell, I barely grew up with a plastic one. My childhood was spent in a rundown trailer park on the absolute wrong side of the tracks. My father passed away when I was young, and his funeral was paid for by the loose change collected by our neighbors. My brother Carter and I learned very early that if we wanted to eat, we had to work. By the time I was 16, I was working 2 jobs, saving every wrinkled dollar bill in a shoebox under my mattress. I didn't have a college fund. I had calluses, a high school diploma, and a burning, desperate need to never be poor again. When I met Emma, I was 27. I was running a small, gritty property flipping business with Carter. Emma was incredible, grounded, smart, and completely oblivious to the fact that her family's wealth was abnormal. Her father, Robert, was a third-generation owner of a massive logistics firm. The first time Emma took me to meet her parents, I felt like I was walking onto a movie set. They lived in a sprawling, custom-built mansion at the end of a private cul-de-sac. The driveway was paved with custom stone, wide enough to fit 6 cars. I pulled up in my beat-up, 10-year-old Ford truck, the engine knocking loudly in the pristine silence of their neighborhood. I remember gripping the steering wheel, my palms sweating, terrified they would take one look at me and tell Emma to run. Robert greeted me at the door with a handshake that was more of a dominance test than a welcome. He looked me up and down, taking in my cheap off-the-rack shirt and scuffed boots. He didn't say anything insulting directly, but his eyes did all the talking. They said, "You are temporary." And then Julian arrived. Julian was married to Emma's older sister. He was the golden boy, the son Robert always wanted but never had. 10 minutes after I sat down on their terrifyingly white living room sofa, the front door swung open and Julian strolled in. He had parked his brand new Porsche 911 right behind my rusty Ford, effectively blocking me in. He tossed his keys on the marble counter, his Rolex catching the light. "Who parked the scrap metal out front?" he asked, laughing loudly. Emma stiffened, but Robert just chuckled. I stood up, offering my hand. "That would be mine. I'm Matthew." Julian looked at my hand for a second too long before giving it a limp shake. "Right? The new guy. Emma told me you dabble in real estate. What is it? Residential rentals. Fixing up old shacks." "I buy and hold," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Small multifamily properties." Julian smirked, a condescending curve of his lips that I would come to know very well. "That's cute. Good for you, man. Smart to start playing with small money while you're young. Maybe one day you'll graduate to the big leagues." He clapped me on the shoulder, patronizing and heavy. "Let me know if you ever need advice on corporate investments. It's a different beast than fixing leaky toilets." He walked away to get a drink, leaving me standing there, my fists clenched in my pockets. Emma grabbed my arm, her eyes pleading with me to ignore it. I swallowed the pride burning in my throat. I didn't say a word. I just watched him pour a glass of expensive scotch, holding court with his father-in-law, discussing 6-figure bonuses and country club memberships. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just marrying Emma. I was stepping into a war zone where the weapons were bank accounts, zip codes, and the brand of car you drove. And I was completely unarmed. That first dinner was just the opening act. Over the next 5 years, the disrespect didn't come in loud, screaming matches. It came in quiet, deliberate, velvet-wrapped knives. It was a slow, agonizing death by 1,000 paper cuts. In my mind, I started keeping what I called the ghost ledger. It was an invisible accounting book of every slight, every exclusion, and every patronizing comment that I was never allowed to react to. Because if I got angry, I would be the hot-headed, uncultured guy from the trailer park confirming all their worst biases. I had to sit there and take it, smiling until my face hurt. Robert was the master of the subtle freeze-out. During family gatherings, the men would often retreat to the patio with their cigars to talk business. Every single time, Robert would pull Julian aside, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as they discussed stock portfolios, market trends, and the eventual inheritance of the family estate. When I tried to join the conversation, offering a perspective on local zoning laws or interest rates, Robert would literally turn his back to me. "That's nice, Matthew," Robert would say, waving a hand in the air as if swatting away a mildly annoying fly. "But Julian and I are discussing macro-level economics. It's a bit out of the scope of residential property management. He would deliberately use complex corporate jargon, looking at me with a pitiful smile, assuming I couldn't comprehend it. Julian would just stand there, swirling his drink, loving every second of my humiliation. The ghost ledger kept filling up. There was the time Julian recommended a financial advisor to the whole family, explicitly stating, "This guy requires a minimum $500,000 buy-in, so Matthew, this probably isn't relevant to you right now, but good info for the rest of us." There was the time my mother-in-law, Martha, planned a family vacation to a luxury resort in Aspen. When she sent out the pricing, she added a private note to Emma. "If Matthew can't afford his share, Robert and I are happy to cover your ticket, honey. We don't want you missing out just because of his situation." But the entry that burned the deepest happened at Christmas, 3 years into my marriage. The family had a tradition of a high-end Secret Santa exchange. The spending limit was $500. I had saved for 2 months to buy Julian a vintage bottle of bourbon he had mentioned wanting. When it came time to open gifts, everyone was tearing into designer boxes and expensive electronics. I sat on the couch, waiting. When the floor was cleared of wrapping paper, my hands were empty. Julian suddenly slapped his forehead, a look of exaggerated shock on his face. "Oh man, Matthew, I was your Secret Santa. I am so sorry. My assistant was supposed to handle the ordering, and it completely slipped my mind with the big corporate merger we're handling. Total oversight. He didn't have a backup gift. He didn't run out to his car to grab something. He just gave me a hollow apology in front of 20 people." Emma was furious, tears stinging her eyes, but Robert quickly diffused the tension. "These things happen, Emma. Julian is a very busy man with heavy responsibilities. Matthew understands. Right, Matthew?" I looked at the vintage bourbon sitting proudly on Julian's lap. I looked at Robert's stern, commanding face, silently daring me to ruin Christmas over a forgotten gift. My chest felt tight, the old shame from my childhood roaring back to life. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a smile. "Of course," I said, my voice dead and flat. "I understand perfectly. I understood that to them I was invisible. I was an unfortunate accessory attached to Emma." I drove home that night in absolute silence. I didn't complain. I didn't yell. I just made a silent vow, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was going to build something so massive, so undeniable, that they would be forced to look up just to see the bottom of my boots. While Julian was busy polishing his Porsche and bragging about his annual salary to anyone who would listen, I vanished into the work. I became a ghost in my own life. I was putting in 80-hour weeks, fueled by black coffee and a burning, unrelenting desire to flip the script. My brother Carter and I stopped flipping small houses and started pooling capital for commercial real estate. We bought an abandoned warehouse, renovated it into high-end loft apartments, and sold it for a massive profit. We took that money, leveraged it, and bought a strip mall. I was reading contracts until my eyes blurred. I was negotiating with city planners, contractors, and bank managers. I was building an empire in the shadows, completely off the radar of my wife's family. During this time, I met Joseph. Joseph was a titan in the commercial real estate world, a man in his late 60s who had built half the skyline but drove a 10-year-old sedan. He saw something in my relentless drive. He became my mentor, teaching me how to structure holding companies, how to mask ownership through LLCs, and how to play the long game. "Wealth is quiet, Matthew," Joseph told me one evening over cheap diner coffee. "Money talks, but wealth whispers. Let the fools scream about their sports cars. You own the road they drive on." 2 years ago, Joseph brought me the deal of a lifetime. The Pinnacle, the city's most prestigious event complex, was quietly looking for a private equity injection. The current owners were over-leveraged and needed cash fast, but they wanted to keep it out of the public news to maintain the venue's exclusive prestige. I drained every single account I had. I took on massive personal debt. I pushed all my chips to the center of the table and bought a 40% controlling stake in the Pinnacle. I remember sitting in the massive, mahogany-paneled office of my lawyer, Wyatt, reviewing the final acquisition documents. Wyatt was a legal bulldog, a guy who loved finding the exact pressure points in a contract. As I scanned the dense legal jargon, one specific clause caught my eye. Section 14.3, the owner's right of event approval. Wyatt, I said, tapping the heavy parchment paper. Explain this right of approval to me. What are the practical limits? Wyatt leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. It's a standard protection clause for high-end venues, Matthew. It allows the owner to decline or revoke any booking that, in their reasonable judgment, poses a reputational risk or a personal conflict of interest. As long as you aren't canceling based on federally protected discriminatory grounds, your authority is absolute. The bar to invoke it is surprisingly low. You just have to state a conflict of interest, refund the deposit, and the door is locked. I stared at the words on the page. I wasn't thinking about Julian at that moment. I was just thinking about protecting my investment. Keep it in, I said, signing my name with a heavy black pen. From that day on, I owned the crown jewel of the city, and I didn't tell a single soul in Emma's family. To them, I was still just the guy struggling with minor real estate properties. I still drove my beat-up Ford to their family dinners. I still wore the same modest suits. When Julian bragged about his stock options, I nodded politely. When Robert gave me unsolicited, elementary financial advice, I thanked him. I was sitting on a mountain of gold, playing the role of the village beggar. It wasn't about deception. It was about peace. I knew that the second Robert and Julian found out about my wealth, the dynamic would shift from condescension to toxic competition. I wanted to keep my sanctuary safe, but a ledger can only hold so many entries before the ink spills over. The ink spilled exactly 3 days before that fateful Tuesday morning, pushing me to the absolute rock bottom of my tolerance. It started with the group chat. Julian was ramping up the planning for his corporate gala. He was gunning for a massive promotion to senior vice president, and this party was his grand audition. He needed the CEO, a man named David, to see him as a sophisticated, high society player. That's when he dropped the message asking me to stay home. You'd find it incredibly dull anyway, I'm sure. No offense meant, man. It's just really not your scene. I remember reading those words while sitting in my home office. The sheer audacity of it left me momentarily breathless. He wasn't just excluding me. He was publicly announcing to 37 family members that I was an embarrassment. He was branding me as a liability. I waited. I stared at my phone, watching the little typing bubbles appear and disappear. I waited for Robert to step in and demand respect for his son-in-law. I waited for my mother-in-law, Martha, to say that family supports family. I even waited for John, a cousin who always acted like my buddy at barbecues, to say something. Instead, the agreements rolled in. Totally get it, Julian. Business is business. Matthew probably wouldn't enjoy the networking anyway. Smart move, Julian. Protect your brand. Nobody defended me. They were all complicit. But the true rock bottom didn't hit until a few hours later. Emma's father, Robert, sent me a private text message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a check-in. It read, Matthew, saw Julian's message in the chat. Don't take it personally. These corporate galas require a certain pedigree and polish. It's high-stakes networking. You're better off staying home, having a beer, and relaxing. Let Julian handle the heavy lifting. He called me a peasant right to my face, wrapped in paternal advice. He validated Julian's cruelty. I felt a cold, hollow sensation expanding in my chest. The years of biting my tongue, the years of forcing smiles, the years of trying to earn the respect of men who fundamentally believed I was genetically inferior to them. It all crashed down on me. I realized in that dark room that there is no amount of hard work that will change the mind of someone committed to misunderstanding you. And then, the final twist of the knife. Emma had left her iPad on the kitchen counter, logged into her iMessage which synced with her phone. I walked by to get a glass of water, and the screen lit up with a notification from her cousin, John. Emma hadn't seen it yet. I glanced at it. John had accidentally sent a screenshot of his private text thread with Julian to Emma, before quickly deleting it. But I saw it. In that private thread, John had written to Julian, "Dude, brutal text to Matthew. Did he cry yet?" Julian had replied, "Let him cry. I'm not having the trailer park representative ruin my shot at the VP seat. He'll shut up and take it like he always does. He'll shut up and take it like he always does." I stood in the dark kitchen, the blue light of the iPad reflecting in my eyes. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from a rage so pure and concentrated it felt like gasoline in my veins. I had spent my entire adult life running from the shame of poverty, building a fortress of wealth and security to protect my family, only to realize I was still living in a mental trailer park built by my in-laws. I was still letting them charge me rent in my own head. I gently placed the iPad back on the counter. The ghost ledger was officially closed. The debt had matured, and it was time to collect. 3 days later, Julian booked the Pinnacle. Unknowingly walking straight into the fortress he thought I wasn't allowed to enter. The morning after Julian sent that arrogant message, I was awake before the sun came up. I didn't sleep a wink. I just lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the gears in my head turning with cold, mechanical precision. When the clock struck 8 a.m., I picked up my phone and dialed Samuel, the general manager of the Pinnacle. Samuel picked up on the second ring. "Good morning, Mr. Matthew. What can I do for you?" "Samuel," I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion. "Pull up the new reservation for December 19th. The corporate gala under the name Julian. Tell me everything about it." I heard the rapid clacking of a keyboard through the speaker. Samuel was the ultimate professional, a man who managed million-dollar events without breaking a sweat. "I have it right here, sir. It's a full venue buyout. The glass house, the grand ballroom, and the terrace. They requested the platinum catering package, top-shelf open bar, and a 10-piece live band. It's a massive setup." "Did he pay the deposit?" I asked. "Yes, sir. He wired a non-refundable deposit of $5,000 yesterday afternoon to lock the date. The remaining balance is due 48 hours before the event." "Did you speak with him personally?" Samuel paused, and I could hear the slight hesitation in his voice. "I did. He called to confirm the wire transfer. He was extremely particular, sir. He demanded to know if we could upgrade the floral arrangements for free because his CEO, David, has very high standards. He explicitly told me, and I quote, 'Do not mess this up. My promotion to senior VP is riding on this night looking flawless.'" A harsh, humorless laugh escaped my throat. Julian was betting his entire career trajectory on a party held in a building I owned. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He was treating my staff like servants to impress a boss who probably didn't even know his last name. "Did he mention anything else?" I pressed. "He was quite aggressive about the exclusivity, sir. He asked if we could guarantee that no riffraff would be allowed near the property lines. He said he wanted heavy security at the gates. Riffraff, like the guy from the trailer park who fixes up old shacks." "All right, Samuel," I said, looking out my window at the gray morning sky. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not process the final paperwork yet. Let the reservation sit in the system as unconfirmed pending for exactly 2 more days. Let him send out his formal invitations. Let him brag to his CEO. Let him feel completely, utterly secure in his booking." "Understood, sir," Samuel replied, a hint of curiosity bleeding into his professional tone. "Is there a problem with the client?" "There is a massive conflict of interest, Samuel. That client is my brother-in-law." Dead silence on the line. Samuel knew exactly how fiercely I protected my privacy. He knew I kept my ownership of the Pinnacle completely isolated from my personal life. "I see," Samuel finally said quietly. "How would you like to proceed?" "I want you to draft a formal cancellation notice citing clause 14.3, reputational risk and personal conflict of interest. Prepare the paperwork to refund his $5,000 deposit in full. But do not send it until I give you the green light on Wednesday morning. I want him to have exactly 6 days to try and find a replacement venue for a 500-person corporate gala in the middle of the busiest holiday season of the year." "Sir, Finding an alternate venue of this caliber with 6 days' notice in December is geographically and physically impossible. He will have to cancel the event entirely. I know, I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. That is the point. Have the documents ready, Samuel. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel malicious. I felt like an accountant balancing a severely overdue ledger. Julian wanted to show his CEO that he was a man of high society, a man of immense power and influence. I was going to show him what real power actually looked like. And I was going to do it without raising my voice, without throwing a single punch, and entirely within the boundaries of the law. An hour later, I was sitting in the heavy leather chair across from Wyatt, my attorney. Wyatt's office smelled of old paper, expensive leather, and expensive cigars. He was a man who lived and breathed contract law, and he had a terrifying reputation in the city for dismantling opposing counsel without breaking a sweat. I tossed my copy of the Pinnacle's venue management agreement onto his massive mahogany desk. It landed with a heavy thud. Wyatt, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on my knees. We need to talk about Clause 14.3, the right of event approval. I need to invoke it. Wyatt paused his typing, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. He looked at the contract, then up at me. He could read the tension radiating off my body. All right, Matthew. Who are we canceling and why? A corporate gala for December 19th. The primary contact is my brother-in-law, Julian. The reason is a severe personal conflict of interest that fundamentally violates the values and comfort of the ownership. Wyatt steepled his fingers, his eyes narrowing as his legal brain went into overdrive. Family disputes are messy, Matthew. Usually, we invoke 14.3 for competing businesses or clients with criminal backgrounds. If we cancel a massive corporate event this close to the date, we are opening ourselves up to potential breach of contract lawsuits, especially if they claim financial damages from the cancellation. I don't care about a lawsuit, I fired back, my voice steady and hard. I have the capital to bury him in litigation until he retires. I want to know if the clause holds water. Wyatt opened the contract and skimmed the dense paragraphs. The language I drafted is bulletproof. The owner retains the absolute right to decline or revoke any booking that, in their reasonable assessment, poses a reputational, moral, or relational conflict. You own the property. He is a direct relational conflict. As long as you are not canceling him because of his race, religion, or gender, you are entirely within your legal rights. He closed the folder and looked at me seriously. But Matthew, to make this legally ironclad, we cannot keep his money. You must forfeit the right to retain the non-refundable deposit. We have to give him his $5,000 back. I don't want his dirty money, Wyatt. I wouldn't use his money to wipe my shoes. Draft the variation. Refund the deposit in full. State clearly that the cancellation is a direct mandate from the property owner. Do you want your name on the formal notice? Wyatt asked softly. Usually, we issue these under the LLC's name to maintain your anonymity. If I put your name on this, the veil is pierced. Your wife's family will know everything. I stood up and walked over to the large window overlooking the city skyline. The sky was a bruising purple, heavy with the promise of a winter storm. I thought about the trailer park. I thought about Robert turning his back to me. I thought about Julian's condescending smirk and that private text message reducing me to a punchline. I thought about the years of hiding my success just to keep a fragile, toxic peace that never existed in the first place. Yes, I said, turning back to face Wyatt. I want my name on it, not the LLC, not a generic management title. I want the document to state clearly that Mr. Matthew, the owner and chairman of the Pinnacle, has personally reviewed and rejected his presence on my property. Wyatt's lips curled into a slow, sharp smile. He appreciated a clean, devastating legal maneuver. He pulled a fresh sheet of official legal letterhead from his drawer. It will be drafted and stamped by noon, Wyatt said, grabbing his heavy brass company seal. We will send it via certified digital mail through Samuel's office, directly to your brother-in-law's corporate email. It will be clean, it will be sudden, and it will be absolute. I watched him press the heavy brass stamp onto the paper, leaving a deep, physical indentation. It sounded like a cell door locking. The trap was officially set. The legal parameters were established. All I had to do now was wait for Wednesday morning and hit the button. But before the storm hit, I had to secure my home base. I had to tell Emma. That evening, I arrived home to the smell of garlic and roasting chicken. Emma was in the kitchen, humming softly to the radio, chopping vegetables on the island. The warmth of the house was a sharp contrast to the cold, calculated maneuvers I had been executing all day. I took off my coat, poured 2 glasses of red wine, and set them on the granite counter. Emma looked up, wiping her hands on a towel, her brow furrowing when she saw the expression on my face. She knew me better than anyone. She knew the difference between my tired-from-work face and my bracing-for-impact face. "Matthew, what is it? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. I took a deep breath. "Sit down, Em. We need to talk. About Julian. About the group chat. And about a few things I've been keeping from you and your family." She sat on the barstool, wrapping her hands tightly around her wine glass. Over the next hour, I didn't hold anything back. I walked her through the ghost ledger. I told her about Robert ignoring me, about the passive-aggressive comments, about the deep, lingering shame of the Christmas gift. And then, I told her about the text message John had sent Julian. I told her exactly what they thought of me. Emma's face went pale. Her eyes welled with tears, and her breathing hitched. "Matthew, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know they were saying those things behind your back. I knew Dad was stubborn, but trailer park representative? That is disgusting." A tear spilled over her cheek, and she furiously wiped it away. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you carry this alone? Because I didn't want to make you choose between me and your family?" I said softly, reaching across the counter to grip her hand. "But I can't do it anymore, Em. I'm done shrinking myself so they can feel tall." Then I took a massive leap of faith. I told her the truth about my finances. I told her about Joseph, the commercial real estate empire, and the 80-hour weeks. And finally, I told her about the pinnacle. I told her that I owned 40% of the most exclusive venue in the state. Emma sat absolutely frozen. She stared at me, processing the fact that her husband, the man her family treated like a blue-collar charity case, was a multimillionaire who owned the very building her brother-in-law was currently trying to use to secure his legacy. "You own the pinnacle?" she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "Matthew, that place is worth tens of millions." "I do. And Julian just booked it for his corporate gala on the 19th. I watched the realization hit her like a freight train. Her mouth dropped open slightly. I pulled out the printed cancellation notice Wyatt had drafted and slid it across the counter. "I'm canceling his event, Emma," I said, my voice resolute. "I am invoking my ownership rights. I am kicking him out of my building, and I am putting my name on the notice. It is going to cause a massive explosion in your family. Your father is going to lose his mind. Julian might lose his job. I need to know right here, right now, if you are with me." I braced myself for her to argue. I braced myself for her to beg me to take the high road, to not destroy the family dynamic, to just let it go one last time. Emma looked down at the legal document. She traced her finger over my printed name at the bottom. She looked at the words trailer park representative echoing in her mind. Slowly, she looked up at me. The tears were gone, replaced by a fierce, protective fire I had never seen before. "Burn it down," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Burn the whole fake, arrogant facade down to the ground, Matthew. I am your wife. You are my family. They have treated you like dirt for 5 years, and I am sick of making excuses for them." She gripped my hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "But we aren't just going to leave the venue empty on the 19th, she added, a brilliant, dangerous spark in her eye. "If you own the glass house, we are hosting our own dinner that night. We are inviting the people who actually supported you. Your brother Carter, Joseph, the people who saw your worth when you had nothing. I felt a massive, crushing weight lift off my chest. I wasn't fighting this war alone anymore. My wife was standing right beside me on the front lines. Done, I said. The true test of my willpower came that weekend. Robert and Martha were hosting their annual end-of-summer barbecue at their mansion. Emma and I decided to attend, maintaining absolute normalcy. It was the perfect opportunity to observe the enemy camp while holding the detonator in my pocket. The backyard smelled of expensive charcoal and grilled Wagyu beef. Robert was standing by the massive outdoor kitchen, holding court with a group of neighbors. Julian was lounging on a patio sofa, wearing designer sunglasses, holding a craft beer. As Emma and I walked onto the patio, the conversation visibly dipped. John, the cousin who had secretly texted Julian that vile message about me, jogged over with a fake, overly enthusiastic smile. Matthew, Emma, great to see you guys, John said, clapping me heavily on the shoulder. He lowered his voice, putting on a mask of deep, manufactured sympathy. Hey man, I saw the group chat the other day. Rough text from Julian. I meant to say something, but you know how it is. Didn't want to rock the boat. You doing okay? I looked into John's eyes. I saw the absolute cowardice hiding behind his practiced smile. He was playing both sides, acting like my friend while mocking my poverty behind closed doors. I'm doing fantastic, John, I said, offering a smile so cold it could freeze water. Never better. Sometimes it's good to know exactly where you stand with people. John shifted uncomfortably, sensing the subtle threat but too arrogant to understand it. Right. Good attitude, man. I walked over to the seating area where Julian was holding court. He didn't bother to stand up. He just gave me a lazy two-finger salute. Matthew, glad you made it to the burgers, at least Julian smirked. Sorry again about the Gala thing. It's just a different caliber of networking. My CEO, David, is flying in some massive tech investors. It's a very tight ship. No apology necessary, Julian, I said, taking a seat across from him. I crossed my legs, resting my arm on the back of the chair, projecting pure, unbothered relaxation. Actually, I heard you booked the Pinnacle. That's a massive power move. I hear they are incredibly strict with their clientele. Julian scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Strict? Please, that's just marketing to keep the desperate out. In the real world, Matthew, money talks. You throw a $5,000 non-refundable deposit at these venue managers, and they roll over like trained dogs. I practically have the general manager, Samuel, eating out of the palm of my hand. He's begging to upgrade my floral packages. I took a slow sip of my water. Is that so? I've heard the owners of that property are completely anonymous and very protective of their brand. I heard they have clauses in their contracts that allow them to cancel anyone they don't like. Julian laughed loudly, drawing the attention of Robert and a few others. Cancel me? Matthew, my firm is bringing them $100,000 in revenue for one night. Nobody cancels a guy holding a check that big. Those contracts are just to scare off the amateur hour. Trust me, I own that venue for the night of the 19th. The CEO is going to be blown away, and that VP seat is mine. Robert walked over, wiping his hands on a towel, beaming with pride at his son-in-law. Julian is playing chess while the rest of the city is playing checkers, Matthew. It's about projecting power. You have to look like $1 million before they pay you $1 million. Maybe take some notes. I said quietly, looking directly at Robert, then shifting my gaze to Julian. I am taking meticulous notes. It is a masterclass in projection. I sat there for another hour, watching Julian brag about his leased Porsche, watching Robert inflate his own ego, watching John scurry around like a rat. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a deep, profound pity. They were so blinded by their own superficial metrics of success that they couldn't see the ground crumbling beneath their feet. As Emma and I walked back to my beat-up Ford truck to leave, Julian yelled out from the patio, "Drive safe, Matthew. Don't let the engine stall on the highway." I didn't turn around. I just opened the door for my wife, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The countdown had officially begun. Wednesday morning. 8:55 a.m. I was sitting at my heavy oak desk in my home office. The door locked. The weather outside was violent. A heavy rainstorm was lashing against the glass windows, matching the turbulent energy inside my chest. My laptop was open. The secure email portal to Samuel's management office was glowing brightly on the screen. Wyatt had delivered the final, officially stamped cancellation document exactly as promised. I had reviewed it 10 times. The legal jargon was precise and lethal. Clause 14.3 was highlighted. The demand for immediate event termination was clear. And at the very bottom, bolded and undeniable, was my name. Mr. Matthew, controlling owner, The Pinnacle. I picked up my phone and called Samuel. Sir, Samuel answered immediately. Is the system primed, Samuel? Are the refund mechanisms authorized? I asked, my voice tight. Everything is ready, Mr. Matthew. The $5,000 deposit is queued to bounce back to the originating corporate account. The date of December 19th has been manually scrubbed from their holding calendar. The email is drafted and loaded with the legal attachment. We are just waiting for your word. I looked at the clock on my computer screen. 8:58 a.m. Julian would be sitting at his desk right now, likely sipping an expensive latte, reviewing the guest list for his perfect, career-defining night. He would be feeling like the king of the world. Send it, I said. Sending now, sir. I heard the faint click of Samuel's mouse through the phone line. The deed was done. The ghost ledger was finally, officially balanced. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. There was no going back now. I had just declared thermonuclear war on my wife's family. Samuel, I said, do you have red receipts activated on that outgoing server? Yes, sir. As per standard legal protocol. Stay on the line. Tell me when he opens it. We waited in silence. The sound of the rain hitting the glass was the only noise in the room. I felt a strange sense of absolute calm wash over me. The anxiety was gone. The fear of Robert's disapproval was gone. The intimidation of Julian's wealth was completely eradicated. Exactly 3 minutes later, Samuel spoke, his professional tone breaking just a fraction. Sir, the tracking pixel has fired. The email has been opened. He is reading the attachment. I closed my eyes, picturing the exact moment the color drained from Julian's perfectly tanned face. I pictured him reading my name at the bottom of that document. Lock down the venue switchboard, Samuel, I instructed. He is going to panic. He is going to call you, and he is going to scream. You are to inform him that the decision is final, non-negotiable, and made directly by the ownership. Do not entertain any counteroffers. And if he threatens legal action, give him Wyatt's direct line. Understood perfectly, Mr. Matthew. Have a good day. I hung up the phone. The kill switch had been flipped. What happened over the next 2 hours was a chaotic masterpiece of absolute destruction. Later relayed to me in painstaking detail by Luke, Julian's junior assistant, who had been sitting right outside his glass-walled office. At 9:02 a.m., Julian opened the email. Luke said he was walking past Julian's door with a stack of files when he heard a strange, choked, gasping sound. He looked through the glass and saw Julian gripping the edges of his mahogany desk, staring at his computer monitor as if it had just grown fangs. His mouth was hanging open, his face transitioning from a healthy tan to a sickly, pale white. Julian frantically clicked his mouse, scrolling down the PDF document. He read the words, conflict of interest. He read the words, immediate cancellation. And then he read the name Matthew. According to Luke, Julian violently shoved his chair back, knocking it into the glass wall with a loud crash. He snatched his desk phone, his hands shaking so violently he misdialed the number twice. He was calling the Pinnacle's main office. Samuel, what the hell is this? Julian screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking, completely abandoning his polished corporate persona. Is this a joke? Who hacked your system? My event is in 6 days. You have my deposit. On the other end, Samuel was a wall of ice. Mr. Julian, as stated in the formal notice, the property owner has invoked clause 14.3, The reservation is permanently revoked. Your deposit is currently being refunded to your corporate account. We consider this matter closed. You can't do this. I am the Vice President of Communications. My CEO is attending this event. Do you know who I am? Julian roared, pounding his fist on the desk. I know exactly who you are, sir, Samuel replied calmly. And so does the owner. That is precisely why you are banned from the premises. Goodbye. The line went dead. Julian slammed the phone down so hard the plastic cracked. He was hyperventilating. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. He had 500 elite guests, including major tech investors and his CEO, expecting a world-class gala in 6 days, and he literally had no building to put them in. Panic set in. Pure, unadulterated, desperate panic. Julian spent the next hour frantically calling every major hotel, country club, and event hall within a 50-mile radius. Luke listened as Julian begged, pleaded, and offered double the standard rates. But it was the middle of December. Every venue worth stepping foot in had been booked solid for 8 months. The only options left were rundown community centers and cheap airport conference rooms. Career suicide for a man trying to impress a CEO. And then the nightmare escalated. Through the glass, Luke watched as David, the CEO of the company, a silver-haired, imposing man who demanded perfection, strolled down the hallway and leaned into Julian's office. Julian, David said, his booming voice carrying through the open door. Just checking in on the gala next week. The board of directors is very excited about the pinnacle. It shows excellent taste. Everything locked in. Julian froze. He looked at David. He looked at his computer screen, where the cancellation notice bearing the name of the trailer park representative he had mocked was glaring back at him. Sweat beaded on Julian's forehead. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yes, David, Julian lied. A tight, terrified smile stretching across his face. Everything is perfectly under control. Just finalizing the floral arrangements. David nodded approvingly and walked away. Julian collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands, realizing he had just lied to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and the clock was ticking down to his absolute ruin. By Thursday morning, the sheer desperation radiating from Julian's camp was practically vibrating through the city. Julian had spent Wednesday night calling every single favor he had ever accumulated. He reached out to hotel managers, country club directors, and even a few local politicians. But the reality of high society event planning is brutal. You do not find an empty grand ballroom for 500 elite corporate guests, complete with top-tier catering, with only 48 hours notice. The city was booked solid for the holidays. Julian's perfectly curated life was unraveling at the speed of light. His massive promotion to senior vice president was entirely dependent on this gala. He had promised CEO David an unforgettable night. Instead, he was staring down the barrel of a catastrophic professional failure. At 10 a.m., my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Robert, my father-in-law. I let it ring 3 times before sliding the green button. I didn't say hello. I just waited. Matthew, Robert barked, his voice tight with a mixture of authority and poorly concealed panic. I need you to drop whatever you are doing. I need a massive favor. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the city skyline. I'm currently at work, Robert. What is the emergency? It is Julian, Robert said, his breathing heavy. He has hit a massive administrative wall with his corporate gala. The venue he booked completely screwed him over. They canceled on him out of nowhere. It is an absolute disaster. He is facing severe blowback from his firm if he doesn't secure a location by tonight. I kept my voice perfectly flat. That sounds like a terrible situation, but I manage small residential properties. Robert, I don't run 5-star catering halls. How exactly do you expect me to help? Robert sighed loudly, the familiar sound of his impatience. I know that, Matthew. I am not asking you to host the event in one of your little duplexes. I need you to do the legwork. I need you to get in your truck and physically drive to every VFW hall, every community center, and every warehouse space in the tri-state area. You know, the blue-collar property managers. You know, the guys who run those cheap rental spots. Find a space. Offer them double. Just secure a roof. He was asking me to abandon my business for the day to act as an unpaid errand boy for the man who had just publicly humiliated me. He wanted me to save Julian's golden reputation. Robert, I said slowly, letting the silence stretch for a moment. Julian specifically told the entire family that his event required a certain pedigree and polish. He said it was a high-level professional crowd. I am entirely certain his CEO does not want to eat cocktail shrimp in a community center that smells like old basketballs. Damn it, Matthew. This is not the time for your pride, Robert shouted. Julian's entire salary structure and his upcoming promotion are on the line. He made a massive mistake. He used corporate funds to wire the deposit to that venue. If the gala does not happen, the accounting department is going to flag the transfer as an unauthorized expenditure. He could face an internal audit. Do you understand what I am saying? I sat forward in my chair. The puzzle pieces clicked into place perfectly. Julian had not just used his own money to show off. He had fronted company cash to secure the pinnacle, assuming his promotion would cover the tracks before anyone noticed. He was not just arrogant. He was desperate and fraudulent. I understand perfectly, Robert, I said, my voice dropping to a low, hard register. Julian gambled with company money to stroke his own ego, and he lost. But I am not his assistant. I am not your errand boy, and I am certainly not going to spend my day fixing a mess for a man who thinks I am beneath him. Tell Julian good luck. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for Robert to yell. I didn't wait for the threats. I just cut the line. My hands were perfectly steady. The ghost ledger was open, and the final accounting was due tonight. Emma and I arrived at Robert and Martha's mansion at 7 p.m. that evening. Martha had sent a frantic text to the family group chat, declaring a state of emergency and demanding everyone gather for dinner to help Julian brainstorm a solution. We walked through the heavy double doors into the grand foyer. The atmosphere inside the house was toxic. The usual smell of expensive candles was replaced by the sharp scent of stale sweat and sheer panic. Julian was pacing the length of the living room. His designer tie was pulled loose, his shirt was wrinkled, and his hair was standing up on end. He looked like a man who had not slept or eaten in days. Robert was sitting in his large leather armchair, massaging his temples, looking older than I had ever seen him. Martha was wringing her hands by the fireplace. When Emma and I walked in, Julian stopped pacing and glared at me. His eyes were bloodshot. Did you find anything? Julian demanded, not even offering a greeting. Robert said he told you to check the warehouse districts. Did you secure a building? I walked calmly into the center of the room. Emma stood right beside me, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. I didn't look, Julian. I had my own business to run. Julian let out a manic, bitter laugh. Your business? Your pathetic little drywall projects? My entire career is burning to the ground. And you couldn't take 2 hours out of your miserable day to help your family? Julian, calm down, Robert warned, though his voice lacked its usual commanding boom. Julian ignored him. He turned his rage entirely on me. You have no idea what I am dealing with. Do you know what kind of sociopath runs the Pinnacle? That bastard owner canceled my event for no reason. He hid behind some legal loophole because he is a coward. If I ever find out who the owner of that LLC is, I swear I will drag him through court until he is entirely bankrupt. I will destroy his life just like he ruined mine. The room was completely silent except for Julian's heavy breathing. I looked at Robert. I looked at Martha. I looked at John, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, trying to make himself invisible. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I felt the crisp, heavy parchment paper Wyatt had given me. I pulled the document out, unfolded it slowly, and stepped forward. I dropped the paper directly onto the glass coffee table in front of Julian. It landed with a soft slap. You don't need to look for him in court, Julian, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of that massive room. You can say it right to my face. Julian looked down at the paper, his brow furrowed in confusion. He reached out with trembling hands and picked it up. His eyes scanned the legal header. He read the venue name. He read clause 14.3, and then his eyes hit the bottom of the page. I watched the exact moment his reality shattered. His jaw went slack. The blood completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. His hands began to shake so violently the paper rattled loudly in the quiet room. "No," Julian whispered, shaking his head. "No, this is a fake. This is a joke." "Read the signature line, Julian," I commanded. Julian swallowed hard, his voice barely a squeak. "Mr. Matthew, controlling owner. The Pinnacle." Robert stood up from his chair. "What is he talking about, Julian? Give me that." Robert snatched the paper from Julian's hands. Robert put on his reading glasses. He read the document. He read it again. I stood tall, rolling my shoulders back. I felt the weight of 5 years of humiliation slide off my back and crash onto the floor. "That bastard owner is me," I said, looking dead into Julian's eyes. "I own the building you tried to use to impress your boss. I own the floor you wanted to walk on. And I invoked my legal right to protect my property from a man who lacks basic human decency. You are banned from my premises. You told the whole family I didn't belong at your party. You were right, because it's not your party anymore. It's my building." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Martha gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. John shrank further into his corner, his eyes wide with sheer terror. Robert lowered the document, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at me as if I had just taken off a mask to reveal an entirely different person. "Matthew," Robert started, his voice cracking. You own the Pinnacle? That property is valued in the tens of millions. How? When did you?" "While you were busy talking down to me on your patio, Robert," I said, not breaking eye contact with him. "While you were deliberately excluding me from financial discussions because I wasn't polished enough for your family. I spent the last 5 years building a commercial real estate portfolio that dwarfs your logistics firm. I kept it quiet because I wanted peace. But your son-in-law decided to mistake my silence for weakness." I turned my attention back to Julian. He looked completely broken. The arrogant, strutting golden boy was gone. In his place was a terrified, desperate man who realized he had just insulted the one person holding the keys to his salvation. "Matthew, please," Julian stammered, taking a step toward me, his hands raised in surrender. I was stressed. The group chat message. It was a stupid joke. I didn't mean it. We are family. You can't do this to me. David is expecting a venue. The catering is paid for. If this falls through, I don't just lose the promotion. The accounting department is going to audit my corporate card. They will see the deposit transaction. "I know," I replied coldly. "You embezzled corporate funds to secure my building. That is your problem, not mine." Julian's face twisted in panic. "I will pay you double. I will get a loan. Just reinstate the booking. I will get down on my knees right now and apologize. I'll tell the whole family I was wrong. Just make a phone call and give me the venue back." He actually dropped to his knees. The great Julian, the man who drove a Porsche and bragged about his stock options, was kneeling on the expensive rug, begging the trailer park representative for mercy. I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt. Just the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger finally cleared. "The cancellation is permanent," I said. "You do not belong in my world. Do not ever speak to me again." Julian's desperation suddenly snapped into blind, humiliated rage. He lunged upward, his hands balling into fists, charging right at me. "You piece of trash!" he screamed. Before I even had to raise my hands to defend myself, Emma stepped directly between us. She slammed both hands into Julian's chest, pushing him back with a surprising amount of force. "Don't you dare touch my husband!" Emma shouted, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Julian stumbled backward, shocked. Emma turned her furious gaze to her father and mother. All of you make me sick, Emma said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and years of repressed anger. You stood by and let Julian treat my husband like dirt for 5 years. You judged him because he didn't inherit his money like you did. Matthew worked himself to the bone to provide for us, and he never asked you for a single dime. He is 10 times the man any of you will ever be. Robert reached out. Emma, sweetheart, please, let's sit down and discuss this rationally. We need to protect the family's reputation. There is no family, Emma fired back, grabbing my arm. You chose Julian. You chose the fake watches and the leased cars. You can keep him. We are done. Before Robert could offer another pathetic excuse, a sharp, piercing ringtone cut through the heavy air. It was Julian's phone, resting on the coffee table. The screen lit up. The caller ID read in large, bold letters, CEO David. Julian stared at the phone as if it were a live grenade. He was frozen. He looked at Robert, his eyes begging for someone to save him. The phone kept ringing. Answer it, I commanded, my voice slicing through his panic. Put it on speaker. Julian's hands shook so violently he almost dropped the device. He hit the green button and tapped the speaker icon. He cleared his throat, desperately trying to summon his professional voice. David, good evening. How can I help you? Julian, David's voice boomed from the speaker. It was not warm. It was not friendly. It was the absolute, freezing tone of a corporate executioner. I just received a very disturbing phone call from the legal representation of the Pinnacle. Julian's eyes widened in sheer terror. He looked at me. I just offered a slow, grim nod. Wyatt had done exactly what I paid him to do. David, I can explain, Julian stammered, sweat pouring down his face. There was an administrative mix-up. The venue. Do not lie to me, Julian, David snapped, cutting him off completely. Their attorney informed me that the venue canceled the reservation due to a severe personal conflict of interest caused by your behavior. Furthermore, they forwarded the deposit refund receipt. The refund was sent to a corporate account routing number, an account you do not have authorization to draw from for personal event deposits. Robert closed his eyes, slumping back into his chair. The embezzlement was exposed. David, please, the promotion, Julian begged, tears actually forming in his eyes. There is no promotion, David said coldly. You used company funds without board approval to secure a venue to stroke your own ego. You then lied to my face this morning when I asked if everything was secure. You have embarrassed this firm, and you have proven yourself entirely untrustworthy. The silence in the room was absolute. Clean out your desk by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Julian, David finalized. Security will be waiting to escort you off the premises. If you are not gone by 8:15, I will have our legal team press formal charges for the unauthorized transfer of funds. You are terminated. Do not contact this number again. The line went dead with a sharp click. Julian dropped the phone. It hit the floor and the screen spiderwebbed into a dozen cracks. He stood there, staring at the broken glass, completely stripped of everything that made him arrogant. He had no job. He had no venue. He had no leverage. The man who told me I would embarrass him had just been publicly destroyed by his own boss. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment 1 below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Emma and I did not say another word. We didn't need to. We turned our backs on the broken pieces of Julian's life and walked toward the heavy front doors. Behind us, the chaos finally erupted. I heard Martha start sobbing uncontrollably. I heard Robert yelling at Julian, his voice cracking with rage and humiliation. You fool! You arrogant, stupid fool! You risked the entire family name for a party? I pushed the front door open, stepping out into the cool, crisp night air. Emma held my hand tightly. The feeling in my chest was incredible. It wasn't just victory. It was an absolute, liberating lightness. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to bite my tongue. I was free. As we walked down the sprawling, custom-paved driveway toward my truck, we witnessed the final, perfect act of karma. A heavy-duty tow truck with flashing yellow lights was backing up the driveway. The driver, a burly guy in a high-vis jacket, hopped out and started hooking heavy steel chains to the front axle of Julian's pristine, silver Porsche 911. Robert burst out of the front door, his face purple with rage. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Get away from that car." The tow truck driver calmly pulled a clipboard from his jacket. "Are you Julian? I have a repossession order here from the bank. 3 months of missed lease payments. The vehicle is being seized." Robert stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at the tow truck. He looked back at the house where Julian was hiding. And then he looked at me. Julian didn't own the car. He didn't own the wealth. He was leasing an image he couldn't afford, using money he didn't have to impress people who didn't care. It was all a grand, pathetic illusion. Emma squeezed my hand, a small, satisfied smile crossing her face. I opened the door of my 10-year-old Ford truck for her. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I put the truck in gear and drove slowly down the driveway, right past the tow truck hauling away Julian's fake idol. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Robert was standing alone in the driveway, bathed in the flashing yellow lights of the repo truck, watching the trailer park representative drive away with his daughter. Friday, December 19th. The night Julian was supposed to have his grand corporate gala. The pinnacle looked absolutely breathtaking. The glass house, our premier dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, was glowing with warm, amber light. The crystal chandeliers caught the reflection of the city skyline, making the room look like it was floating in the stars. But there were no corporate executives. There were no fake smiles, no networking, and absolutely no stress. Instead, there was a long, beautifully decorated mahogany table set for 20 people. At the head of the table sat my brother, Carter. He was wearing a sharp suit, laughing loudly at a joke, holding a glass of top-shelf bourbon. Next to him was Joseph, my mentor, smiling warmly at the empire we had built together. Wyatt, my attorney, was there, enjoying a massive steak and looking extremely satisfied with his recent legal work. Mayor Dillon, a man I had worked with closely on several massive city zoning projects, was sitting across from Emma, discussing local charity initiatives. These were the people who saw my value when I had dirt under my fingernails. These were the people who invested their time, their wisdom, and their loyalty in me. I stood near the edge of the room, holding a glass of water, just taking it all in. I watched Emma laughing freely, completely unburdened by the toxic expectations of her parents. She looked radiant. Suddenly, Samuel approached me, giving a polite nod. "Mr. Matthew, you have a late arrival at the front gate." He insists he was invited, though he is not on the formal list. "Who is it, Samuel?" "It is David, sir, the CEO of the tech firm." I raised an eyebrow. I had sent a private message to David through Wyatt earlier in the week, thanking him for his swift handling of the Julian situation and extending an open invitation to visit the property anytime. I didn't expect him to actually show up tonight. "Let him in," I said. A few minutes later, David walked into the glass house. He was an imposing man, sharp and perceptive. He didn't look around the room with arrogance. He looked around with genuine appreciation for the architecture and the atmosphere. He spotted me and walked over, extending his hand. "Matthew, thank you for the invitation. I wanted to come down here personally to shake the hand of the man who owns this masterpiece." I shook his hand firmly. "It is an honor to have you, David. I appreciate a man who values integrity in his company." David offered a grim smile. "Integrity is everything in business. I despise men who wear fake armor. Your brother-in-law was a liability. You did my firm a favor by exposing his lack of judgment before I handed him the keys to the kingdom." He paused, looking around the room. "You have built an incredible legacy here, Matthew. Quiet wealth is always the most dangerous. Stay for a drink, David, I offered. I would be honored, he replied. Julian wanted to use my building to impress David. Instead, David was standing in my building, drinking my bourbon, respecting me as an equal. The universe has a beautiful way of balancing the scales. An hour later, as the dinner was winding down and the guests were moving to the terrace for cigars and coffee, Samuel approached me again. This time, his expression was much more guarded. Sir, there is a vehicle at the main gate. It is Robert and Martha. I tightened my grip on my glass. I looked out the window. It was snowing lightly, the flakes drifting down into the glowing lights of the courtyard. I could have turned them away. I had every right to leave them standing in the cold. Emma, I called softly. She walked over, sensing the shift in my posture. Your parents are at the gate. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Do you want them here? They need to see it, I said. They need to walk through the front door. I turned to Samuel. Open the gates. Bring them to the private lounge off the main hall. I will meet them there. I walked into the private lounge a few minutes later. Robert and Martha were standing near the fireplace. The transformation in them was jarring. The arrogant, commanding patriarch was gone. Robert looked incredibly old. His shoulders were slumped. His expensive coat looked heavy on his frame, and his eyes were downcast. Martha looked pale and exhausted. They looked around the room, taking in the original artwork, the imported leather, the sheer, undeniable magnitude of the wealth I controlled. Matthew, Robert started, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't use his booming, authoritative tone. He spoke like a man standing before a judge. Thank you for letting us in. I stood near the door, my hands in my pockets. Why are you here, Robert? He swallowed hard. To apologize. To look you in the eye and tell you that I was a complete, arrogant fool. I judged you entirely on where you came from, and I ignored everything about who you actually were. I let Julian disrespect you in my home because he fit the picture of what I thought success looked like. I was blind. Martha stepped forward, tears in her eyes. We lost our daughter, Matthew. Emma won't return our calls. We protected the wrong man and we lost our family. We are so sorry. I looked at Robert, the man who had turned his back on me to smoke cigars with the golden child. The man who told me to stay home and drink a beer while Julian handled the heavy lifting. You didn't just judge my background, Robert, I said, my voice steady and firm. You assumed my background made me weak. You thought because I didn't brag, I didn't have anything worth bragging about. Julian built his entire life on debt, lies, and company funds. I built my life on concrete, steel, and 80-hour work weeks. You don't have to like me, Robert, but you will respect me. Robert nodded slowly, tears welling in his own eyes. You are the true pride of this family, Matthew. I see that now. I just hope, someday, you and Emma can find it in your hearts to forgive us. Forgiveness takes time, I said. But the door isn't locked anymore. You can find your way out. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't offer a dramatic reconciliation. I just offered the truth. I left them standing in the lounge and walked back out to my wife, my friends, and the empire I had built with my own two hands. Several months have passed since that December night. The dust has finally settled, and the landscape of our lives looks entirely different. Julian's grand illusion completely collapsed. After David fired him, the news of his embezzlement spread quietly through the corporate network. No reputable firm would touch him. He lost the luxury apartment. The bank took the rest of his leased assets. Last I heard, he was working as a mid-level sales representative for a regional paper supply company. He takes the public bus to work because he can't secure a loan for a new car. The golden child is finally learning what calluses feel like. Robert and Martha are trying. They send Emma letters and they occasionally meet for coffee. They are careful around me now. They speak to me with a level of cautious respect that borders on reverence. It's not a perfect relationship, but the toxic hierarchy has been permanently dismantled. Emma and I are stronger than ever. We don't have to hide our success anymore. Yesterday evening, Emma and I were standing on the private balcony of the Pinnacle, looking down at the city. The sun was setting, casting a brilliant orange glow over the skyline. I held her close, feeling the cool evening wind. I thought about the ghost ledger. I thought about the years of keeping score, of swallowing my pride, of letting people make me feel small. If there is one thing I have learned from this entire journey, it is this: the people who try to diminish you quietly, the ones who exclude you from group chats, who mock your job or your car, they are not doing it from a place of strength. They are doing it out of pure, unadulterated fear. They are terrified that their carefully constructed facade isn't enough. They are terrified that someone who doesn't fit their mold might actually be building something stronger, deeper, and more real than they could ever imagine. The ghost ledger isn't just a record of what people do to you. It is a record of their own insecurities. The best response to that kind of fear isn't to fight it loudly. It isn't to scream about your accomplishments or demand respect at a barbecue. The best response is to walk away, keep your head down, and build quietly. Build with intention. Work in the shadows while they posture in the light. And then, when the moment is right, when the building is finished and the foundation is solid, you don't fight them. You just open the door, turn on the lights, and let the sheer magnitude of your reality crush their illusions. You never have to shrink yourself to keep the peace for people who don't respect you. You never have to accept an invitation to feel small. The table you build on your own terms, with your own hands, with the people who truly love you, that table is yours. And nobody can ever tell you that you don't belong there. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I hope this resonated with you in some way. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, dealing with someone who constantly tried to make you feel inferior? Let me know down in the comments. Before you go, I have a special request for those of you who made it to the very end. Please drop a W in the comments. W stands for winner. That is my secret code to recognize the 1% Club, the truly amazing people who listen, understand, and stay until the final word. It lets me know who the real winners are in this community. Please don't forget to hit that like button and follow the channel. We are building something great here, and I want you to be a part of the next story. Until next time, stay strong, keep building quietly, and never let them see you sweat.